It must really be nice, huh? All the Vikings fans out there. How does it feel? Does it feel good? Spoiled brats. After spending years in purgatory with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, the Vikings pivoted away from that and hit the reset button, kicking him to the curb and deciding to start fresh. And they were a good team already, making the playoffs consistently and posting some really solid records. But this year, they dialed it to a 10. And listen, I know Sam crapped himself in the playoffs this year, but this level of success was unprecedented. Yeah, sure, you cry about getting brutally assaulted by the Rams in the wild card, or beaten by the Giants a couple years ago, despite boasting 3 lost seasons in both of those years. But the simple fact is, no one expected you guys to be here. There was serious discussion that the Vikings were going to have a top 10 pick in this upcoming draft. And not only do you get a 14-win season, but 2 potential franchise quarterbacks? Give me a break. Of course, this season is an ultimate disappointment. Losing in the wildcard game after a 14-win season will never be good, but you know what is good though? Going 14-3 in a rebuilding season. No matter what you want to say, the Vikings objectively have a good future. A guy who wasn't even supposed to be their quarterback of the future performed like a top 10 one in the league, and even though this playoff berth may have been disappointing, the Vikings have the tools to be very good for a long time. Now, despite this, they have a big offseason coming up. Fresh off of that 14-win season, they have decisions to make in these upcoming months that could shift the future of this franchise. They're in an unusual position. Sam Darnold, who was supposed to be a placeholder for JJ McCarthy, played like a top 10 quarterback and is due for a contract. And they have a decision to make. Keeping Sam, the guy who played elite this past season, or looking to the 22-year-old high potential youngster in JJ McCarthy. And in this dilemma, there are 4 possible outcomes. 1, they keep Darnold and let JJ go. 2, they keep JJ and let Darnold go. 3, they keep both. Or 4, they keep neither. Now, this dilemma doesn't happen usually. It's not an often scenario where you're staring down multiple potential franchise quarterbacks on the same roster. Ironically enough, the most recent time I remember this happening was with the Vikings in 2017 after that Case Keenum season. I think that year they had Sam Bradford, Teddy Bridgewater, and Case Keenum to pick from. They picked option 4, got rid of all of those guys, and picked Kirk Cousins instead. Common narrative with this dilemma is that, quote unquote, it's a good problem to have, which may be true, well, unless you pick the wrong one. Having 2 potential franchise guys is never going to be a bad thing, but the Vikings or any team in this situation would likely be forced to pick one of these guys to be their quarterback of the future. And for the Vikings, either direction they decide to go to isn't a surefire path to success. This Sam Darnold season could just be a fluke and could end with him reverting back to his usual form after this year, and JJ McCarthy could become a bust, especially with his leg injury. It's a good problem to have until you consider the prospect of picking the wrong guy, which would put your franchise in a downward spiral. So when you look at the options the Vikings have this season, you realize how franchise-altering this decision is for them. Now, first off, let's get option 4 out of there. That's obviously not going to happen. Besides JJ McCarthy being 22, there's no good enough option in this free agency class for it to make sense to get rid of both of them. In the 2017 example, Kirk Cousins was an upgrade over all 3 quarterbacks. That doesn't really exist this season, which leaves the top 3. Here's my opinion on all of them. For the third option, I think this is what the Vikings would have gone with if Sam Darnold was actually good in the playoffs. If you continued playing how he did in the regular season throughout the playoffs, I feel like this would have been the ideal scenario to go down. Now, it wouldn't have been easy. Sam would definitely like to get paid, along with wanting to be committed to. And unless the Vikings forced him to play under the franchise tag, which wouldn't happen, they probably wouldn't have been able to retain both JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold. The thing is, even with his poor play in the playoffs, he still wants those 2 things: commitment and money. It's just that he's not good, or not good enough to be prioritized over JJ. I think Darnold would still prefer commitment and a decent back, and I seriously doubt that the Vikings would keep Darnold and let JJ go to guarantee that commitment. Now, there was an argument for that to happen before Darnold crapped his pants in the 2 most important games of the season, but to keep Darnold, they would most likely have to sign him to a long-term deal, working over $45 million annually to a guy who is shown to not really be cool under pressure, and then proceed to toss JJ to the side for at least the time being. And I think they prefer not to go through that hassle. That crosses off the first and third scenario. and leaves the second option, which is the most likely one. I think the Vikings appreciate what Darnold has done for them, but feel it's time to move on. Keeping him would just mean investing a boatload of money into him, along with pushing their future plans back at the very least, and at the most, getting rid of them entirely. As I mentioned before, Darnold's poor play in 2 critical games really eliminates the justification of doing that. That being said, JJ is guaranteed to be an elite quarterback. As much as I like JJ McCarthy, I have multiple vids talking about him, check it out. The odds of him being a bust is not 0 and are higher than Sam's. Allocating the future to JJ isn't unreasonable, but the usual chance of failure when it comes with a young quarterback adds that risk factor that I was talking about. Looking at the Vikings' future, their ceiling is certainly higher with JJ McCarthy. That's the main reason they drafted him. Sure, Sam played great this year, but the potential unsustainability of his production and his inconsistency in crunch time, under pressure, and in the playoffs lowers this team's ceiling. Not only does JJ McCarthy have the potential to override those deficiencies, but costing $30 million less makes it a no-brainer. Now, I doubt JJ will replace Sam's production this season. But even then, seeing what Kevin O'Connell did with Sam Darnold, I also seriously doubt that JJ's development would be a concern. And when you consider he also has the best receiver in the league, that Darnold is coming back, Dallas Turner is going to take another step, and the team is getting healthier, the Vikings have the flexibility to build onto an already solid roster with a quarterback on a rookie deal like JJ McCarthy. They just don't have that flexibility with Sam Darnold. That's the main reason he's heading to free agency. And he's going to have a lot of options. There are multiple teams that could use upgrades in their quarterback position. Teams like the Jets, Raiders, Browns, Titans, Giants, Seahawks if Geno Smith leaves, and the Saints. But out of these options, there are a few factors to consider. There's cap space, draft position, and current team/staff construction. And with those things in mind, I'll start to make my prediction. I'll cross off the Titans. They have the first pick and are most likely picking Ward or Sanders. The Seahawks are next off the list. It's possible, but so much is dependent on if Geno Smith stays, and swapping out Geno for Sam Darnold is too much of a lateral move for that to be considered a viable plan. After that, I'll cross off the Saints. Derek Carr is owed a lot of money down the line. I can see them adding a rookie quarterback, but they're not going to pull another $40+ million into their quarterback room. There's just no way that happens. And after this, I feel like the teams left are the only feasible options for Darnold. But, I mean, looking at these teams, like, sheesh, these aren't the greatest of situations. Browns have expressed interest in getting a quarterback to upgrade from Watson, and even though they have the second pick, them selecting a quarterback is all but guaranteed. There's been whispers that the Browns would prefer a vet compared to a rookie, and that they highly value Travis Hunter or whatever, or they just don't like the quarterback class. I could see them passing up on a quarterback and just signing a vet like Darnold instead. The Raiders have been trying to get a quarterback for the past few seasons and looks to be out of range in this draft, so it's very likely that they look to free agency to sign, at the very least, a warm body that could play the position. For the Giants, Dable and Schoen just barely saved their jobs by the skin of their teeth. And I have a 29-minute video speaking how desperately they need a quarterback. And quite frankly, they're the only team that's like really desperate on you. They do almost anything to get a half-decent quarterback on their roster, and Sam falls under that. And all of this is great for these teams. Sam is a fine option for them, and I'm sure all of them could work out a way to give him a boatload of money that he wants. But again, like, my God, all 3 of these teams are bottom feeders who are picking near the top 5. They all have less than 5 wins and no established coach. And looking at his shortcomings in Minnesota, I have a lot of doubt that that season is getting recreated in a bad situation. Minnesota did a lot to mask his flaws until it got to the last 2 games, but eventually his fragile mental state showed through. If he got on a team with a questionable offensive line, I seriously doubt he'd be able to perform. He's shown to be very easy to knock out of rhythm, and this is why I think it's very important for Darnold to go to at least a decent team and not hop on a ship that's already sinking to try to drag it up. Which is why I think that there's one team who takes the cake and that will win the sweepstakes. The Steelers flamed out this year, and I could see them looking for an upgrade over this quarterback room. And Darnold is in his 20s and is a step above Russell based on how they played last season. There's no way Tomlin and the Steelers organization is comfortable with these 7-seeded winless playoff berths. They need a sharp change. something that could exponentially expand their ceiling. Moving on from Russ and replacing him with Darnold is certainly something that could do the trick. The difference between the Steelers and the rest of the teams that I mentioned before is the fact that they're actually good. There is no way Darnold will look at 3-14 and 2-15 disaster zones that are offering him contracts and pick them over an objectively well-run organization like the Steelers. Trust me, he does not want his career ruined a second time. Despite all of this though, there are genuine concerns for Sam Darnold. His poor performance under pressure and in high-stakes situations are very concerning and something to keep your eyes peeled on. There's a reason the Vikings let him go in favor of JJ McCarthy. I don't know if Sam Darnold keeps up the production he had last season, or at the very least, I don't know if he can lead whatever team he goes to a Super Bowl. So many precious intangibles needed for elite quarterback play, not being rattled easily, being confident and clutch, all looked horrible in those final 2 games. He literally looked like he saw ghosts. If slight pressure like that causes that level of unraveling from Darnold, it's very hard to see him being consistent without the elite ecosystem that's developed in Minnesota.